The ice screamed before Eliza's heart could dot it, split beneath her boots with a violent crack, sharp as a gunshot, and the sound echoed across the frozen river like a warning sent too late. Eliza dropped to her knees, instinctively curling around her son as jagged white fractures raced outward beneath them. For a breathless moment, the earth itself seemed to hesitate, deciding whether to keep them or claim them. "Get up." The command came from behind, rough and impatient. Boots crunched on the snow, heavy and deliberate. Eliza swallowed the panic clawing at her throat and pushed herself upright, her legs trembling so badly she thought they might give way. She clutched Jonah tighter, his small body rigid against her chest. The boy's breath came in short, frightened gasps, his face buried in the thin wool of her shawl. "Mama," he whispered, his voice barely louder than the wind. "It's cold." "I know," she murmured, kissing the top of his head though her lips were numb. "Just stay with me." The moon hung low and pale, casting the frozen river in ghostly silver. Frost glittered across the ice like broken glass. Every step sent a bolt of fear through her bones. Behind her, Silas' heart shifted his weight, impatience written into the very way he stood. He was her late husband's older brother, tall and broad, with a beard trimmed too neatly for a man who liked to pretend he was rugged. Beside him loomed Caleb, younger, heavier, his mouth twisted in a perpetual sneer. Their lantern swung between them, throwing long, warped shadows across the snow. "Keep moving," Silas said again, his tone sharp with false restraint. "We didn't drag you all this way so you could rest." Eliza forced herself forward, every muscle screaming. Her boots were soaked through, her toes long past numb. The hem of her dress was stiff with ice, scraping against her ankles like frozen wire. They had started before sunset. No coats for her or Jonah, no wagon. Just a rope binding her wrists and Silas's smile as he pointed her toward the wilderness. She had known then, known exactly what this was. The reading of the will had been quick, almost casual. Her husband's land, fertile timber ground north of town, was suddenly deemed too much responsibility for a woman alone. Silas had folded the paper with care, his eyes bright with something ugly. "You'll be provided for," he had said. Somewhere else. Now that somewhere else was a frozen river miles from the nearest settlement. "Eliza," Caleb called mockingly from behind, "you better hurry." "Ice don't wait for widows." Silas chuckled. "Neither does nature." Eliza bit her lip until she tasted blood. She refused to give them the satisfaction of her fear. They reached the far bank, where the river gave way to dense forest. Tall pines loomed overhead, their branches sagging under heavy snow, forming a dark, suffocating wall. The wind cut sharper here, whistling through the trees like something alive. Silas stopped and lifted the lantern higher, surveying the woods as if assessing livestock. "This'll do," he said. Caleb stepped forward and roughly untied the rope around Eliza's wrists. Her hands fell limply to her sides, burning with returning circulation. "Go on," Caleb said, shoving her shoulder. "This is where you start your new life." Eliza staggered, barely keeping her footing. "Please," she said, her voice breaking despite her efforts. "Jonah is just a child. He won't survive the night." Silas's expression hardened. Whatever faint amusement had been there vanished. "You should have thought of that before," he replied coldly. "Before you decided that land was yours." "It was my husband's," Eliza said. "And he wanted." Silas struck her. The blow came so fast she barely saw it. Pain exploded across her cheek, her vision blurring as she stumbled back, nearly falling. Jonah screamed, clinging to her. "Don't say his name," Silas hissed. "He was weak." "Same as you." Caleb looked away, though his mouth still curled in a cruel half-smile. Silas straightened, brushing his gloves as though he'd dirtied them. "You tried to come back," he said, his voice eerily calm. We'll tell the town you ran off. Took the boy. No one will look for you." Eliza stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She searched their faces, these men she had once eaten supper with, laughed with, trusted. There was nothing there. No guilt. No mercy. Silas lifted the lantern and turned away. "Let's go," he said. The light bobbed as they walked back toward the river, their boots crunching steadily. The glow shrank, dimmed, then vanished entirely, swallowed by darkness and trees. Silence rushed in to fill the space. They left behind. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the ears, heavy and absolute. No birds. No wind. Just the distant groan of shifting ice and the soft whimpering of her son. Eliza dropped to her knees in the snow, finally allowing herself to breathe. Jonah sobbed against her chest, his small fingers clutching her shawl. "Mama," he cried, his voice cracking. "I'm scared." She wrapped both arms around him, rocking gently despite the ache in her bones. "I know," she whispered. "I know, my love." Her mind raced. They couldn't stay here. Exposure would kill Jonah before dawn. She forced herself to look around, squinting into the darkness. Trees. Endless trees. Then she heard it. At first, she thought it was another trick of fear, ice shifting, branches creaking. But it came again, steady and unmistakable. Thunk. A pause. Thunk. The rhythmic bite of metal into wood. Eliza's heart leapt. So hard it hurt. Someone was out there. She rose unsteadily, lifting Jonah into her arms. Every step felt like walking on knives, but hope, fragile and dangerous, burned brighter than the cold. "Hold on," she whispered to Jonah. "Just hold on." She followed the sound deeper into the forest, the darkness closing in around them, unaware that this frozen night, meant to be their end, was about to change everything they thought they knew about survival, justice, and the kind of men the frontier still hid in its shadows. The knocking came out wrong, too weak, too desperate, because Eliza's hands no longer felt like her own. She struck the rough wooden door again, this time with her shoulder, pain flaring through bone and muscle as Jonah sagged in her arms. His breaths were shallow now, little clouds that barely formed in the cold air. "Please," she whispered to the dark cabin wall. "Please." For a moment, nothing answered but the wind threading through the pines. Then came the sound of metal sliding against wood. The door opened a fraction, and a rifle barrel appeared where warmth should have been. "Don't move." The voice was calm, but not gentle. It carried the weight of someone who had learned the cost of hesitation. Eliza froze. She lifted her free hand slowly, fingers trembling. "I won't," she said. "I swear." "My boy, he's freezing." The door opened wider. The man standing there was not what she expected. He was taller than Silas, broader through the shoulders, with a coat worn thin from years of hard weather. His beard was dark but streaked with gray, and his eyes sharp, pale. Watchful moved from her face to Jonah's limp form and back again. "How far back?" he asked. "The river," Eliza said. "They left us." Something hardened in the man's eyes. He glanced past her into the trees, scanning the darkness. "You followed?" he asked again. "No," she said quickly. "They're gone." "I swear it." The man hesitated only a second longer, then stepped aside. Inside. Now. Warmth hit Eliza so suddenly her knees buckled. The cabin smelled of smoke, pine resin, and something savory simmering in an iron pot. The door shut behind them with a solid thud that felt like a promise. The man moved fast. He bolted the door, then crossed the room in long strides, pulling a blanket from a peg and wrapping it around Jonah. "Sit," he said, guiding Eliza toward a rough wooden chair near the fire. She sat, clutching Jonah as heat seeped painfully into her frozen limbs. Her fingers burned. Her cheeks throbbed. She bit back a cry. The man crouched, checking Jonah's hands and feet with practiced care. "He conscious?" Jonah's eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" He murmured. "I'm here," Eliza said, tears spilling freely now. "I'm right here." The man handed Jonah a tin cup. "Sip, slow. What is it?" Eliza asked. "Broth, rabbit. Won't hurt him." Jonah drank obediently, spilling some down his chin. The man wiped it away with the edge of his sleeve, surprisingly gentle. "I'm Owen," he said. "Owen Cross." "Eliza," she replied. "This is Jonah." Owen nodded once, committing the names to memory. "You're safe for now. For now?" Eliza echoed. Owen stood and stirred the fire. "Night like this don't forgive mistakes." He watched her carefully as she wrapped her hands around the cup he gave her, steam curling into her face. She caught him studying the bruise blooming along her cheek. "Silas?" he asked. Her stomach dropped. "You know him?" Owen's jaw tightened. "I know the kind." Caleb's laughter echoed in her mind, cruel and careless. "They wanted my husband's land," she said quietly. "They said a woman couldn't hold it. And instead of taking it outright, they tried to kill you," Owen said. It wasn't a question. Eliza nodded. Owen turned away, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. "Cowards," he muttered. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks up the chimney. Jonah had curled against Eliza now, breathing deeper, steadier. "You can stay till morning," Owen said. "We'll figure the rest after daylight." "Thank you," Eliza whispered. Owen didn't answer. He moved to the far corner of the cabin, laying out a bedroll near the hearth. "Sleep?" he said. "I'll keep watch." She wanted to argue, to insist she help somehow, but exhaustion dragged her down like a weight. She lay beside Jonah, pulling the blanket over them both. As sleep crept in, fear returned, quiet and insidious. "What if they come back?" she asked softly. Owen's voice came from the shadows. "Then they'll leave worse than they arrived." She believed him. Morning came gray and slow. Light filtered through frost-rimed windows, painting the cabin in pale blue. Eliza woke to the smell of coffee and wood smoke. Jonah stirred beside her. "Mama," he said sleepily. "It's warm." She smiled, brushing his hair back. "It is." Owen sat at the table, sharpening a knife with steady strokes. He looked up when he heard them. "You hungry?" he asked Jonah. Jonah nodded eagerly. Owen slid a plate across the table. "Eat." As Jonah dug in, Eliza stood, swaying slightly. Owen noticed at once. "Sit," he said. "You'll fall." She obeyed reluctantly. "I don't want to be a burden." Owen snorted. "You're not. Burdens don't fight to keep their kids alive." She studied him as Jonah ate. "Why live out here?" she asked. Owen paused, knife mid-stroke. "Because towns remember too much." She didn't press. Later, Owen showed her the land-thick forest, a narrow creek, animal tracks crisscrossing the snow. It was beautiful in a harsh, quiet way. "They won't look for you here," he said. "They might," Eliza replied. "Silas doesn't let go." Owen's eyes hardened. "Then he'll learn." That afternoon, Jonah laughed for the first time in days, chasing a squirrel across the snow. The sound caught Eliza off guard, piercing her chest with equal parts joy and sorrow. She turned to Owen. "You saved us." He shook his head. "You saved yourselves." "I just opened the door." As night fell again, Eliza realized something frightening and hopeful all at once. For the first time since her husband died, she wasn't waiting to be taken. She was choosing to stay. Spring did not arrive gently. It came with the sound of splitting ice and swollen water tearing at the banks of the creek, dragging winter away in long, violent breaths. Eliza stood at the edge of the clearing one morning and watched the river surge past, brown and furious. carrying broken branches and chunks of old snow like the bones of a season that refused to go quietly behind her. Jonah laughed. The sound still surprised her every time. It rose bright and sudden, like a bird startled into flight. He was crouched near the cabin steps, poking a stick at a puddle where tiny insects skated across the surface. "They're dancing," he announced. Eliza smiled despite herself. "They're trying not to drown." Jonah looked up, wide-eyed. "Like us?" The smile faded, but she nodded. "Like us." Owen emerged from the trees with a brace of rabbits slung over his shoulder. His boots were caked with mud, his sleeves rolled up, forearms corded and scarred. He paused when he heard Jonah's laughter, something soft crossing his face before he masked it again. "You'll scare off everything within a mile," Owen said dryly. Jonah grinned. "Good. I don't like rabbits." Owen snorted and headed for the cabin. Eliza followed, helping him skin the animals as she had learned to do over the past weeks. Her hands were no longer clumsy. The work no longer turned her stomach. The valley had begun to feel like a place that belonged to them. Snow still lingered in the shadows, but the air carried the promise of green. Eliza had started a small garden near the cabin: onions, beans, whatever Owen had seed for. Jonah helped by digging holes far too large for what they planted. At night, they ate together by firelight. Owen spoke little, but when he did, Jonah listened as if every word were gold. Stories of animals trapped and outwitted, of storms survived, of a world that was dangerous but not cruel by nature, only by men. Eliza caught herself watching Owen more often than she meant to. The way he moved through the woods like he belonged there. The way he never raised his voice. The way he checked the door twice every night before sleeping. One morning, she found tracks near the tree line. They were shallow but fresh, pressed into the softening earth where snow had melted back. Horse tracks. 3 of them. Her chest tightened. Owen knelt beside them, running his fingers along the edges. "Not passing through?" he said. "They're circling, Eliza?" Jonah called from the cabin. "Mama?" She forced her voice steady. "I'm here." Owen stood. His jaw was set, eyes distant. "Go inside. Pack what you can." "They found us," she said. "They suspected," Owen corrected. "Now they know." Eliza shook her head. "They won't stop. Silas never does." Owen turned to her fully then. "You trust me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes. Then do exactly what I say." By late afternoon, the air had gone unnaturally still. Birds fell silent. Even Jonah sensed it. Staying close to Eliza's side, the riders appeared just before dusk. Silas came first, upright in the saddle, hat tipped back like he was riding into a town that belonged to him. Caleb followed, his face tight, his legs stiff from the old injury that still hadn't healed right. A third man Eliza didn't recognize brought up the rear, his eyes darting nervously. "Well now," Silas called, reining in his horse near the clearing. "If it isn't my dear sister-in-law." Eliza stepped forward, Owen beside her. Jonah stood just behind, small hands fisted in Owen's coat. "You have no right to be here," Eliza said. Silas laughed. "Still pretending you own something?" Caleb spat into the dirt. "We told you not to come back." "You left us to die," Eliza said, her voice shaking with anger she no longer bothered to hide. Silas shrugged. "Unfortunate." Owen stepped forward then, his presence shifting the air around him. "You're trespassing." Silas looked him over slowly. "And you are?" Owen Cross. The name meant nothing to Silas, but it meant something to Caleb. His eyes widened slightly. "Cross?" Caleb muttered. The one from Silas shot him a look. Quiet. Owen's hand rested near his holster, casual but ready. "You have 2 choices," he said calmly. "Leave now, or leave later missing something you'll regret." Silas smiled thinly. Bold words from a man alone. Owen glanced at Jonah. I'm not. The third rider shifted uneasily. Silas, maybe we should. Silas cut him off. Get down, he said to Caleb. Caleb's hand moved. The gunshot cracked the air. Everything happened at once. Owen shoved Eliza and Jonah back as he drew, the sound of his rifle thunderous in the small clearing. Caleb screamed, his leg buckling as he fell from his horse. Blood staining the mud. The third rider bolted, horse tearing off into the trees. Silas froze, staring at his brother writhing on the ground. You shot him, Silas said. Horse lie. Owen kept the rifle trained on him. I warned you. Eliza stood shaking, her ears ringing, Jonah clinging to her skirts. Take him, Owen said, and go. Silas's face twisted with rage and fear. This isn't over. Owen's eyes were ice. It is for you. Silas dismounted slowly, hauling Caleb upright with curses and threats. They retreated, leaving deep ruts in the soft earth as they went. When they were gone, the clearing felt wrong, too open, too quiet. Eliza's knees gave out. Owen caught her before she hit the ground. That night, Eliza cried not from fear, but release. Owen sat nearby, silent, offering his presence like a shield. They'll come back, she whispered. Not like this, Owen said. And not soon. She looked at him, truly looked. You risked everything. He shrugged. So did you. Jonah slept between them, the fire crackling low. Outside, the river roared wild, alive, unstoppable, and Eliza knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Summer settled over the valley like a held breath finally released. The creek that had raged and torn at its banks now ran clear and gentle, sunlight flashing across its surface in quicksilver ribbons. Wildflowers pushed through the softened earth in stubborn clusters, and the air carried the warm scent of pine, damp soil, and growing things. Eliza woke one morning to birdsong instead of wind and realized she no longer listened for approaching boots the moment she opened her eyes. Jonah was already outside. She found him near the edge of the clearing, crouched low with a stick in his hand, drawing shapes in the dirt. His hair had grown longer, curling at his ears, his cheeks fuller now that hunger no longer haunted every meal. I'm making a map, he said without looking up. A map of what? Eliza asked, settling beside him. Our place, Jonah replied seriously. He pointed with his stick. That's the creek. That's the big tree Owen says got struck by lightning. And that's where we live. Eliza swallowed. Our place, she repeated softly. Owen emerged from the cabin carrying a bundle of cut boards under one arm. He had spent the past weeks repairing the roof, reinforcing the door, making the cabin stronger in ways Eliza hadn't realized it needed until now. You're up early, he said. Jonah beamed. I didn't want to miss the day. Owen raised an eyebrow. Miss it doing what? Being alive, Jonah declared. Eliza felt her throat tighten. The days passed in a rhythm that felt earned. Eliza tended the garden and learned which plants could heal and which could kill. Owen taught Jonah how to set snares and read tracks, but only after making him swear never to hunt for sport. Jonah took the oath solemnly. At night, they sat by the fire, the glow soft and steady. Sometimes Owen spoke of his past, not in detail, but in fragments. A brother who had followed the wrong man. A town that had burned when nobody stood up soon enough. Eliza listened without judgment. One evening, as cicadas sang in the trees, Eliza finally asked the question that had lived in her chest for weeks. What happens when Silas comes back? Owen stared into the fire. He won't. She waited. Men like him don't return to places where they lose face, Owen continued. They go where they can still pretend they're feared. And Caleb? Eliza asked. Owen's mouth tightened. He'll limp for the rest of his life. A reminder. The thought brought her no joy. Only a quiet sense of balance restored. Late one afternoon, a rider appeared at the far end of the valley. Eliza's heart slammed hard enough to steal her breath. Owen saw it too, his body going still, hand drifting toward his rifle. But the rider stopped well short of the clearing and dismounted slowly. Hands visible. It was the third man from before, the one who had fled. "I won't come closer," he called. "I just came to talk." Owen studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Say it." The man swallowed. "Silas is gone. Took what money he could and headed south. Caleb's alive, but broken. They won't trouble you again." Eliza let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The man hesitated. "What you did, some folks heard. Not everyone thinks it was wrong." Owen said nothing. The rider mounted again and left, disappearing as quietly as he had come. That night, Eliza slept deeply, without dreams. Weeks later, Owen returned from town with a folded paper. "What's that?" Eliza asked. "Deed," Owen said simply. "Your husband's land. It's in your name." Her hand shook as she took it. "How?" "Turns out the law don't favor men who abandon widows in winter," Owen said. Silas didn't stick around to argue. Tears slid down Eliza's cheeks. "You didn't have to do this." Owen met her gaze. "I wanted to." That evening, Jonah insisted they celebrate. He built a small fire near the creek and roasted fish badly, laughing when they burned. "This means we're staying forever, right?" he asked. Eliza looked at Owen. Owen looked at the valley, at the cabin, at the boy who had brought laughter back into a place long silent. "If you want to," he said. Eliza reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his rough, warm palm. "We want to." Autumn came slowly, painting the valley gold and red. Eliza hung herbs to dry. Jonah helped Owen stack wood. And the cabin filled with the quiet signs of permanence. One crisp morning, Eliza stood at the river's edge where the ice had once nearly taken everything from her. The water moved gently now, reflecting the sky. Owen joined her. "You all right?" She nodded. "I was thinking about that night." He said nothing. "I thought surviving was enough," she continued. "But it wasn't. Living is different." Owen glanced at her. "You're good at it." She smiled. Jonah ran toward them, waving a carved whistle Owen had made him. "Listen." The sound rose clear and bright, carrying across the valley. Eliza took Owen's hand again, this time without fear. Behind them stood a cabin built not just of wood, but of choice, resilience, and quiet courage. And in that valley, far from cruelty, far from wicked claims, they were no longer running. They were home.